I stood in front of the tall mirror inside the boutique, almost startled by the reflection staring back. The crisp ivory uniform clung neatly to my frame, metals gleaming against the fabric, and for the first time in years I felt like the version of myself I had once imagined. A woman stepping into a future she thought she understood. Behind me, my mother's reflection appeared, her weathered hands steady as she adjusted the collar. "Danielle, you look like the daughter I always knew you'd become," she murmured, her voice carrying pride and that nervous edge of someone preparing to let go. A small smile tugged at my lips as I remembered being 10 years old, wrapping myself in old blankets and pretending they were military dress whites, swearing to anyone who'd listen that I would one day wear them for real. Back then it was nothing more than a game. Now staring at my reflection, I wanted to believe Ryan Caldwell was the man who would walk beside me through the life I'd fought so hard to build. For 3 years he had been reliable, attentive, the kind of man my mother admired. He never missed family dinners, always showed up with flowers, always spoke to my father with respect. To them he seemed perfect. To me, he was the man who had promised to honor every sacrifice I had made in uniform and beyond. As the seamstress tucked the last fold into place, my mother clasped my hands tightly. "Tomorrow, you'll be the most radiant bride anyone's ever seen in Norfolk," she whispered, her eyes shimmering not just with pride, but with the years of hope she had invested in me. I pressed my palms against my chest, trying to calm the steady drum of my heart. I told myself it was excitement, nothing more, the weight of anticipation before a life was set to change. On the drive home we went through the list again. Ceremony confirmed, chapel decorated, guest list finalized, reception hall secured. My mother ticked each item off like a commander reviewing orders. Then she smirked. "And the honeymoon?" I laughed. Ryan had insisted on keeping that part secret. He promised it would be unforgettable, and I clung to that word as though it were a talisman. Everything was prepared. The community was already buzzing about the wedding, about how the Caldwells and the Mitchells were finally joining. Yet as I stared out the window at the familiar streets passing by, a ripple of unease pressed against my chest. Nothing had fallen out of place. Not a single detail overlooked in months of planning, and still my palms wouldn't stop shaking. "Too perfect," a voice murmured in the back of my head. "Nothing ever runs this smooth." I forced the thought down with a nervous laugh. Every bride gets cold feet, I told myself, brushing aside the uneasy chill that seemed to curl deeper with every breath. Tomorrow was supposed to be the brightest day of my life, and I wanted so badly to believe that was true. Back home, I lifted the uniform carefully from its bag and hung it inside my closet, fingertips grazing over the polished fabric one last time before shutting the door. Tomorrow it would carry me down the aisle. My mother was waiting in my room, stacking neatly folded linens into the cedar trunk she'd kept for me since I was a girl. "Danielle," she said softly, "are you certain you're ready for this?" I laughed a little too quickly. "Mom, Ryan and I have talked about it all. He wants kids and so do I. We'll stay in his apartment until we can get a bigger place. It's all mapped out." She nodded with satisfaction, then reminded me of everything my father had prepared. The downtown condo already signed in my name, the car sitting polished in the driveway, the savings account tucked aside for our start. To her, it was a triumph, the kind of story neighbors whispered about with envy. But hearing it said aloud made something turn in my stomach. "Mom, I don't care about any of that," I said, lowering myself onto the edge of the bed. "What matters is that Ryan and I love each other." The words left my mouth smoothly, but almost immediately doubt slid in behind them. I thought of all those small moments in the past year that never quite added up. The calls he didn't answer until hours later, claiming he was tied up. The way he'd pocket his phone the second I walked into the room. The endless late nights out with friends. And the way he said "I love you," not as a gift but always as a reply, never first. Instead he'd flash that easy grin and call me soldier, like nicknames could patch over what real words should mean. I shook my head sharply, scolding myself for creating ghosts where there weren't any. After all, he had proposed, hadn't he? He had helped plan every detail of this wedding. Tomorrow he would be there, standing with me before God and everyone else, pledging forever. Still, that nervous hum in my chest refused to fade. I kept insisting it was normal, that every bride wrestled with doubt the night before her vows. Maybe the restless hands, the sleepless pacing, the hollow ache in my stomach were just part of the tradition. The sudden ring of my phone pulled me out of the spiral. I snatched it up. "Hello." "Hey, soldier." Ryan's voice was smooth, steady, the kind of calm I always thought I could lean on. "How's my bride-to-be holding up?" I sank back against the headboard, closing my eyes as the sound of him filled the room. "The uniform fits perfect," I whispered. "I can't wait for tomorrow," he said softly. "And I can't wait to make you mine. Forever, Danielle. We'll have forever." I smiled into the dark, clutching the phone tighter, letting his words quiet the storm inside me, at least for a while. But after the call ended, I couldn't sit still. Ryan's tone had been so tender, so convincing, that I wanted nothing more than to see him, to share the anticipation gnawing at me. "Just half an hour," I told my mother as I slipped on a light jacket. The Norfolk evening was warm and fragrant, filled with the faint salt of the nearby bay and the hum of cicadas. My boots tapped lightly across the sidewalk as I cut through the park, nodding at neighbors who called out blessings for tomorrow. I smiled back, playing the part of the luckiest woman alive. Ryan's apartment building came into view, its brick facade freshly painted. The same orange tabby lounged in the downstairs window as always. I climbed the stairwell 2 steps at a time, heart pounding not with dread but with anticipation. I raised my hand to knock when his voice drifted through the thin wooden door. "Mom, stop worrying. Everything's under control." I froze. His tone was calm, deliberate, the same voice he used when closing a deal. Then came his mother's reply, fragile and uncertain. "Ryan, are you sure about this? About Danielle?" I waited for the immediate denial. The promise. The declaration of love. Instead he chuckled low, careless. "I've told you 100 times. Danielle feels like family. Is comfortable. A dependable girl." The word stabbed through me. Comfortable. I pressed closer, desperate for him to fix it, to say what I needed to hear. "But do you actually love her?" his mother pressed. Ryan laughed outright. A sharp, hollow sound that chilled me. "Love, Mom, is for storybooks. In the real world, you use your head. You've seen what her parents are offering us. The condo, the car, the savings, and Dad's connections at the base. This is the smart move. This isn't love. It's a transaction." The stairwell spun beneath me, the cold metal banister biting into my palm as I clutched it for balance. Every tender word Ryan had ever whispered, every kiss on my forehead, every careful promise, it all splintered like brittle glass. Then another voice cut through, deeper, steady, proud. "His father. She's a good choice. Polite. Comes from the right kind of family. Respectable. You're making the smart move, son." My stomach clenched, but Ryan's next words finished what little strength I had left. "And besides, Alyssa Kent is back in town. Remember her? We were fire once. With her I'll have passion. With Danielle I'll have security. It's the best of both worlds." The name slammed through my skull. Alyssa, I remembered her faintly. Dark hair, older than us, the kind of woman who could turn heads without trying. She'd been gone for years, and now she was back, effortlessly slipping into the space I thought I held. Ryan's voice dropped, quieter but still clear through the thin wood. "I'm seeing her tomorrow morning. Before the ceremony. Just to settle things." That was enough. My body reacted before thought caught up. I turned, heels striking the stairs too loudly, echoing my escape. My eyes blurred, my chest heaving, my breath fractured into shallow gasps. 3 years of believing. 3 years of building dreams out of ash. Sister. Duty. Alyssa. The words pounded in my skull. By the time I burst into the Norfolk night, the truth had sunk its claws into me. Ryan had never loved me. Not once. Every moment, every memory, every smile, it had all been an act, rehearsed and measured. My storybook had ended at his doorstep. I couldn't tell you how I made it back across town. One second I was outside his door with my heart ripped open. The next I was in my room, the faint glow of my pressed uniform spilling from the half-open closet like a cruel reminder of what tomorrow was supposed to be. My mother's voice drifted from the hallway. "Danielle? Are you all right?" I forced a smile she couldn't see, muttered something about being tired, and slipped past her before she noticed my trembling hands. The house was silent. But inside me chaos thundered. I lay stiff on my bed, staring at the ceiling as the last 3 years replayed in brutal fragments. The way Ryan had pushed to introduce me to his parents so quickly, had that been eagerness or strategy? The questions he asked about my father's service, the sly curiosity about the condo deed, the accounts, the car. The way he avoided saying I love you until I gave it to him first and he'd echo it back with that polished smile. How could I have been so blind? I had built castles in the sand and convinced myself they were stone fortresses. For hours I lay caught between two impossible choices. Stay silent, walk down the aisle and keep my family's honor intact. The guests smiling, the photographs framed, my parents holding their heads high in Norfolk circles. But I would know. Every morning I would wake beside a man who measured me like a ledger, who whispered passion into another woman's ear while telling me I was like family. The alternative? Walk away. Shatter my parents' dreams, dismantle months of planning, and humiliate the Mitchell name in front of the entire town. My mother's proud tears in the boutique, my father's precise plans. It would all unravel because of me. Near midnight I dragged myself back in front of the mirror. The reflection staring back was pale, hollow-eyed, lips trembling. I looked less like a bride and more like a soldier who'd already lost the fight. And yet, somewhere under the wreckage a spark still glowed. A stubborn ember that whispered I was worth more than a deal made in secret. By 0400 hours I couldn't lie still anymore. I opened the closet, brushed my fingers over the crisp white uniform one last time, then turned away. Instead I reached for a small rucksack and packed only the essentials. My passport, a few bills, and the envelope I'd set aside for the honeymoon. My hands shook as I wrote a note in hurried script. Mom, Dad, please forgive me. I can't explain it all right now, but I can't go through with this wedding. I love you, Danielle. As the first streaks of dawn crept over the horizon, I placed the note on my pillow and lingered in the doorway of my childhood room. My chest ached, but underneath the heartbreak was a strange kind of strength. I could not marry Ryan Caldwell. I would not. The sky was still bruised with the last shadows of night when I slipped out the front door. My boots barely whispered on the porch steps as I carried the pack that somehow grew heavier with every stride. Behind me, the house slept quietly, my parents dreaming of a daughter walking down an aisle, not one fleeing into the morning. The streets of Norfolk were nearly empty. A lone milk truck rattled past and somewhere far off, church bells tolled 6. I kept my eyes forward, clutching the strap of my bag like it was the only thing keeping me anchored. The bus station reeked of diesel and burnt coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I stepped up to the counter. One ticket to DC, I managed, my voice unsteady. The cashier didn't ask questions. He just slid the ticket across the counter. Departure 0800. 2 hours. Enough time for Ryan to meet Alyssa at whatever spot they used to haunt. Enough time for my parents to discover the note waiting on my pillow. The thought twisted my stomach. I stepped outside into the weak light, pulled my phone out and dialed Marie, my closest friend from the academy. Her voice came groggy, thick with sleep. Danielle? What's wrong? There's no wedding, I cut in quickly. Marie, please, tell my parents I'm safe, but I can't marry him. There was silence. Then disbelief. Danielle, what are you saying? Did something happen? I can't explain. Just make sure they know I'm alive. My throat closed as I whispered, I'm sorry. And before her questions could pin me down, I ended the call. The guilt struck in waves. My mother's tears, my father's fury, the humiliation they'd feel when guests arrived to an empty chapel. My whole life they'd given me everything. And here I was repaying them with shame, abandoning the day they had worked so hard to build. But then another voice inside me rose louder, steadier. How could I stay? How could I bind myself forever to a man who lied, who saw me only as an arrangement? To marry Ryan would have been the deeper betrayal, not just of myself but of the family who raised me to honor truth. When the bus doors finally opened, I climbed aboard, my chest tight with fear. The vinyl seats smelled faintly of dust and oil. I slid into one by the window and pressed my forehead against the glass. As the city slipped further away, my reflection stared back, pale but resolute. A runaway bride without a map, carrying nothing but the clothes on my back and the weight of my own choice. Fear clawed at me, fear of being broke, of being alone, of drowning in a city where no one knew my name. But beneath that fear was something harder, almost defiant. I had chosen truth over illusion. Whatever waited in Washington, at least it would be real. The bus rattled north, every mile pulling me farther from the life I had rehearsed. I leaned my forehead against the window, watching the salt marsh give way to endless stretches of pine. My phone buzzed. Marie's name lit the screen. My chest tightened as I answered. Danielle, what did you do? Her voice was hushed, frantic, as if she had stepped into a corridor just to call. Your parents found the note at dawn. Your mom is in pieces. Your dad, he almost called in a missing person report until I convinced him you were safe. I swallowed hard, guilt slicing through me at the thought of their faces. Marie, I couldn't marry him. I know, she whispered, but the guests are there, Danielle. They're seated, flowers on the tables, waiting. And Ryan, he's telling everyone you came down sick. She paused. Her voice cracked. But people are whispering. They're saying you bolted. The words hit like shrapnel. Bolted. Because that's exactly what I'd done. And in Norfolk, news traveled faster than smoke. By sundown, the whole community would know. Your mother couldn't even finish a sentence, Marie added. Your father just kept pacing, saying she wouldn't leave without a reason. And Ryan, he looked pale as death. Tried to laugh it off, but no one bought it. I closed my eyes, letting her words paint the scene I would never see. Guests fidgeting in polished shoes, gifts stacked neatly at the door, a string quartet waiting for a cue that never came. My parents standing there with nothing but a crumpled note in their hands. And Ryan, pinned in by rumors, his flawless mask crumbling as neighbors whispered. What are they saying about me? I asked quietly. That maybe you got cold feet, Marie said. That maybe you realized something. Some are even hinting Ryan wasn't the man he pretended to be. Danielle, this is going to be the scandal of the year. A sharp breath escaped me, half laugh, half sob. Then let it be. Better a scandal than a lie. By the time the bus hissed to a halt in D.C., I gathered my pack with trembling fingers. Outside, the Capitol loomed, vast, indifferent, alive with a rhythm that didn't know my story. While Norfolk feasted on gossip that afternoon, I was handing wrinkled bills to a landlady in a faded sweatshirt for a tiny rented room above a corner shop. A single cot, a cracked dresser, a view of a crooked sycamore. It wasn't the life I'd been promised, but it was mine, and it was honest. That first night blurred by in exhaustion and nerves. I lay on the narrow bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the muffled hum of traffic like a lullaby I didn't know. By morning, reality slammed into me. No plan. No allies. No safety net. The only work I'd ever done outside the military was in my father's office, answering phones and filing paperwork he'd tossed my way out of pity. None of it would help me now. Out here, rank and family names meant nothing. I shoved myself into the streets with a folded newspaper tucked under my arm, circling classifieds like I had a clue what I was doing. But every listing wanted skills I didn't have. The cash I'd saved for a honeymoon suddenly looked like a lifeline stretched too thin, weeks at best before it snapped. An old internet cafe caught my eye, its glass fogged from the heat of battered monitors. Inside, a college kid with headphones noticed me fumbling and leaned over to show me how to search job boards, how to submit applications. My fingers hovered over the keys as I tried to stitch together a resume worth reading. 3 years of administrative work under my father's name. Would anyone take that seriously in this city? I sent application after application, heart hammering with each submit. By the 10th, sweat dampened my palms. I felt like a cadet bluffing her way through an exam she hadn't studied for. 2 days later, the phone rang in my cramped room. A crisp female voice identified herself from a logistics firm downtown. We received your application. Can you come in tomorrow for an interview? My breath caught. Yes. Absolutely. The next morning, I stood before a steel and glass tower that seemed to cut into the clouds. My knees nearly buckled as I walked across the lobby, clutching the strap of my thrift store handbag like a lifeline. In the mirrored elevator, I caught a glimpse of myself. Pressed blouse, hair in a strict bun, makeup masking the hollows under my eyes. I looked composed. Inside, I was shaking like a rookie on her first deployment. The interview room was sleek and cold. A woman in a navy suit sat across from me, pen balanced over her notepad. Tell me about your experience. My throat tightened. I spoke of organizing schedules, managing clients, half truth, half stretch, but my voice stayed steady even as my hands trembled beneath the table. When she finally set her pen down, her voice softened. We'll start you on a 3-month probation. The salary is modest at first, but if you prove yourself, there's room to advance. Can you begin Monday? Relief nearly knocked me to my knees. Yes. Absolutely. Walking out into the sunlight, the air felt sharper, cleaner. Not victory, not yet, but the first flicker of it. My first foothold since leaving Norfolk. 3 months blurred past in a cycle of long hours and exhaustion. At first I lived terrified each mistake would unmask me. But little by little the fear eased. By the end of probation my supervisor shook my hand and said, "Welcome aboard." It was the first time in years I felt like I'd earned something without anyone pulling strings. That fragile stability shattered the morning Ryan Caldwell walked through the door. I had just settled into my cubicle when the receptionist's voice came through the intercom. "There's a man here asking for you." I stepped into the hallway and froze. Ryan stood there in a tailored suit thinner than I remembered, clutching a bouquet of white lilies, my mother's favorite, not mine. His eyes darted across my face, searching, uncertain, almost pleading. "Danielle," he breathed like we were standing alone in a chapel instead of a bustling office floor. "I had to find you." The air caught in my chest. For a split second I was back at his apartment door in Norfolk, listening to the laughter that had gutted me. But this time I drew my shoulders back the way years of service had taught me. "How did you track me down?" I asked, my voice flat. "Your father," he admitted. "I wore him down. It took weeks, but he finally told me. Please, just hear me out." We ended up in a small conference room. He laid the flowers on the table between us like a peace offering. "I was a fool," he began, his voice low. "I said things I didn't mean. I thought marriage was supposed to be about stability, but when you walked away I realized what I had lost. I love you, Danielle. I truly do." My jaw clenched. "Stop. I heard every word you said that night. Every single one. I heard you laugh when your mother asked if you loved me. I heard you promise that woman you'd meet her on the morning of our wedding." His face drained of color. You heard that?" "Yes. And the call. You told her you loved her while you were still building a life with me." My voice was steady, cold steel beneath the scar tissue. "So don't stand here and pretend you've suddenly discovered love because I walked away." He leaned forward, desperation creeping into his voice. "I was wrong. I thought I could have both, but losing you showed me the truth. I only want you." I shook my head slowly. "No, Ryan. You didn't lose me because of one mistake. You lost me because you never saw me as anything more than leverage. And I deserve more than that." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the hum of the vent overhead. For the first time I saw him not as the man who betrayed me, but as something smaller, trapped by his own choices, powerless against them. Later that week I grabbed coffee with Marcus, a teammate from my unit who had since joined the firm's security division. He didn't come with flowers or speeches. He asked how my report had gone. He listened when I vented about deadlines. He laughed when I cracked nervous jokes. With him there were no masks, no ulterior motives, just honesty. Walking back beside him I realized Ryan no longer had a grip on me. The past had come knocking and I had shut the door. A year passed before I returned to Norfolk. My mother's birthday drew me home, though the thought of facing the old whispers made my stomach twist. By then DC had become my world. Steady work, new friends, a modest but solid apartment. Still, Norfolk was where I belonged to two people who had never stopped loving me. When the train pulled into the station I saw them. My mother's tears fell as she clung to me as if I might disappear again. My father's hug was longer than usual, his silence more forgiving than words. Scars lingered, but their forgiveness wrapped around me like armor. That weekend, family gathered in our home for a small celebration. Neighbors stole glances, some whispering, others nodding with what almost looked like respect. The scandal that once haunted me no longer stung. I had survived it. The next day in a quiet cafe I saw him. Ryan. He was standing by the counter, Samantha at his side. A wedding ring gleamed on her hand. They looked settled, comfortable, the kind of practiced happiness that comes when people finally get what they want. He noticed me first. For a heartbeat, something flickered in his eyes. Unease, maybe guilt, but then he managed a polite smile. "Danielle," he said softly. Samantha's eyes narrowed protectively when she noticed me, but I gave a calm nod. "Ryan." "Samantha." My own voice startled me with its steadiness. He stumbled through an introduction and she extended her hand. I took it without hesitation. "Congratulations," I said. "I truly hope you found the happiness you were looking for." And to my surprise I meant it. The bitterness I once carried had burned away, leaving only something cleaner: acceptance. What happened between us was over. A closed chapter that no longer held any power over me. When I stepped back into the warm Norfolk sunlight, I felt lighter than I had in years. Seeing him didn't stir up rage or longing. It simply confirmed what I already knew. I had let go. That evening, I sat at my parents' kitchen table, the smell of my mother's peach cobbler curling through the air like it always had when I was a girl. I thought of the soldier I'd become, the woman who had walked away from the safety of lies and built her own strength piece by piece. I wasn't the naive bride-to-be who once thought security was the same as love. I was someone who had rebuilt herself from nothing, who chose truth over convenience, grit over illusion. Back in DC, life with Marcus unfolded quietly at its own pace. He never pressed me for promises I wasn't ready to give. We shared dinners after long shifts, stories about our deployments, even comfortable silences that said more than words. His honesty was his greatest gift, and it laid a foundation stronger than any dowry, stronger even than the walls of Savannah's expectations. As the train carried me north after the visit, I watched the fields roll past and realized Savannah would always be a part of my story, but it no longer defined me. That uniform I once wore taught me discipline, but walking away taught me something greater: courage. When the train slid into Union Station, the skyline burning gold against the evening, I felt something unexpected: relief. This city, once so overwhelming, had become home. I thought about the woman I had been a year ago, trembling, clutching a single bag, running from a wedding that was never real. Back then I thought I was a coward. But now I understood the truth. I wasn't running from responsibility. I was running toward freedom. That night, Marcus showed up at my apartment with takeout and that easy smile of his. We ate on my second-hand couch, shoulder to shoulder, laughing about the little things. At one point he reached for my hand. And this time I didn't pull away. Not because of obligation. Not because of appearances. But because I wanted to. Standing later at my window, the city lights burning bright against the night, my reflection looked calm, almost radiant. I thought of the wedding dress still hanging in my childhood closet, unworn. Once it symbolized everything I thought I needed. Now it was nothing but fabric. The real armor I wore was made of choices I had stitched together with steady hands and stubborn courage. People might still whisper that I was the bride who ran. Let them. I knew better. I wasn't a runaway. I was a soldier who refused to live a lie. And because of that, my future, at last, was mine.